Today, we are talking about China's central bank, which has been developing the digital yuan. The country's capital city, Beijing, recently handed out 1.5 million as part of a digital currency test during the Lunar New Year. So, what are its plans and intentions with its digital currency? Joining me today is an expert on China, Gordon Chang. He is a popular columnist and the author of The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, it's been a very long time. So nice to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Daniela.
Gordon, I wanted to get your thoughts on China rolling out a digital version of its currency. My main question is, are they looking to dethrone the greenback here with it?
Well, China has tried to do that for decades, but it's not making any progress. And in fact, you can even say that they're slipping behind because international usage of the renminbi is like 2% on SWIFT. And that compares to almost 40% for the dollar. China has promised many times, 3 times, to make their currency convertible, which is absolute requirement to dethrone the dollar. They had promised to do that by the turn of the century. They promised to do that by about 2015. They promised to do that by the end of last year. And all that we have seen is actually China tighten control of the currency. So, they can have this general notion that, yes, they're going to have the renminbi as the world's reserve currency, but they're not making any progress.
Gordon, I guess how important is it who will be first? And it definitely seems it will be China, but how important is it in the hierarchy of things of who will be the first country to roll out a digital version of its currency? We see that Sweden has plans. Europe is thinking of rolling out a digital version of the euro. So how crucial is it as to who will be first?
I don't think it's really that important because in terms of usage of currency and other matters, which are really what we're talking about, the digital renminbi is really not going, I think, to make much progress. Got to remember that one of the things that China wants to do is to have real-time information on usage of the currency. This is not a cryptocurrency. This is a central bank currency, which means Beijing is going to understand and see how people are using this, which means this is basically totalitarian social control. Now, people in China, of course, will use it because they won't really have too much of a choice. But the point is, somebody in Hong Kong or somebody in Sweden, they're not going to let that happen. And indeed, the other important thing that's going on here, I think, is that China is attacking its digital payment platforms, Alipay and WeChat Pay. So really, this is an attack on the world's most sophisticated digital payment platforms. And so you can see this not as progress, but really as the opposite of progress.
And that's a really good point you were raising, Gordon, about privacy and surveillance. I was going to say, are these digital currencies just a way for the government to have greater control over how people spend their money, where they spend it?
Yeah, and this thing about Alipay, which is in the news, of course, because Jack Ma, the founding force behind Alipay, was disappeared. The Ant IPO was delayed or actually suspended at the last moment. And so people do look at Alipay because it is the most used digital payment platform in China. And one could say, look, they're rolling out the central bank's digital currency really as an attempt to undermine Alipay. And of course, that's true also for WeChat Pay. So this really is, I think, it's a substitution maybe of payment platforms, but that's really about it. Because, at the end of the day, I don't see how this really benefits China to have this associated with the central bank, but I can see how it sort of helps the Communist Party maintain control.
Right. And I'm happy you also brought up the fact that it has no similarities with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, correct?
Correct, because Bitcoin is divorced from any central bank, from any
That's right.
government. It is meant to be totally private and secure. China's digital currency is going to be a central bank currency, which means, of course, it's backed by the government, the Communist Party. But it's not going to be secure or safe in that way. People are going to basically surrender their information.
Hmm.
Alipay is valuable because it has all of this consumer data. Well, that consumer data is going to be taken away and used by the Chinese central government. So this is not an advance.
Gordon, I want to ask you now, with President Biden now at the helm, how will that change relations with China?
That's a great question. And I wish I knew the answer. Um, but we've seen some robust rhetoric from Biden and from members of his administration, but what we have seen though is really distressing. So there have been these executive orders that have been taking down protections that the Trump administration had put in place. And they go, for instance, to the US electric grid, which is now, of course, in the news because of Texas. Trump in May of last year imposed a ban on China selling equipment to the US grid because of concerns about sabotage. But on his very first day, within hours of taking the oath of office, Biden actually repealed that protection. And that's, to me, just indefensible. But it's also been repeated in a number of different areas. So it looks like this is a big giveaway. And the thing that's really curious about this,
Yeah.
Danny, is that Biden didn't get anything from Beijing for all of these concessions that he's made to the Chinese.
Mm.
So this is a real head scratcher.
Final topic I want to talk about with you, since we used to talk about gold a lot uh, before. Any insights as to Chinese appetite for gold? Had some sources telling me China was buying tons and tons of gold because their intent is later to issue some sort of digital backed gold currency. Have you heard anything about that?
People have been talking about a Chinese gold-backed currency for quite some time, but it's really hard to see how that would work out in practice. I think China's hoarding gold because it hoards everything else that it tries to control. So, I think that China is not going to want to have any currency, digital or paper or whatever, that it doesn't totally control. And so I think that they're very happy with the fiat currency. And so, going forward, people will say, well, maybe a gold backed currency would increase the international usage of the renminbi. But that's pretty unlikely because they're not willing to make it convertible and can't make it convertible under their current economic system. And indeed, nobody is going to trust the People's Bank of China to manage a currency for the benefit of everyone, which is really what you need to have an international currency. So, gold backed, digital, whatever, China is just not going to make progress.
Gordon Chang, as always, fantastic insights from you. You are the author of The Coming Collapse of China. I urge everyone to get a copy. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Danny.
And by the way, to our audience, if you're interested in China and want to learn more, check out Stansberry's Steve Sugarud's True Wealth Opportunities China, edited by Brian Takango. And thank you for watching this edition of StansberryInvestor.com. We will have much more for you, so be sure to stay tuned. Keep following us on all our social media platforms. Thanks for watching. I'm Daniela Cambone.